Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Your favorite podcast, it's Critical Blast.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
And I'm Scott Wakefield, host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham, where we talk about comic books and all kinds of great storytelling, sometimes with incredible guests. And we want you to join us Wednesday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you there.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
I worked for Malibu and several other companies over the years, and more recently working for Silverline Comics, one of the best, if not the best, independent comic book publishing company out there right now. And I've done work with Cat and Mouse and covers for many of the other titles. Tonight, we're going to be discussing two of these illustrious titles, specifically Divinity #2, the long-awaited sequel to the award-winning first issue, Divinity #1. And we'll also be discussing Steam Patriots #1. And then our second hour, as is our usual habit, we will discuss pop culture rumors. Today's rumors will be swirling about the mysterious developments concerning Star Wars Kenobi television series being developed by Disney. But let's return now to Silverline content and begin with the creative genius behind the award-winning Divinity, namely the Empress of the Inks herself, Barbara J. Kaelberg. Barbara, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, as he said, my name's Barbara Kaelberg, and I've been an inker for 30 plus years. I know I say this every single week, but hopefully we've got some new viewers.
Of course.
So hang in there as I go through my routine. And I've inked for just about everybody under the sun. The last few years, I've been exclusively with Silverline. And I'm also the CFO of Silverline. I do, as Dean said, I am the creator, colorist, co-writer, and inker for Divinity. I'm also currently inking issue #4 of Cat and Mouse, and I also color Sirens. Coloring has been a new thing that I picked up in the last couple of years to try to stretch my skills and push the envelope. And I'm greatly enjoying it.
Well,
So,
you're a Renaissance woman. That's what you are. Do a little bit of
padding my
everything.
resume.
I know, it's fantastic. So I want to also, before we get started, I would be remiss if I didn't thank our very talented producer, Carlos, and also our sponsors tonight, the Daytona Beach Comic Convention. We appreciate them. That convention will be held September 18th and 19th in the spectacular city of Daytona. Now, let's take a look, first of all, at the cover for #2 of Divinity. And as we bring that up and take a look at it, Barb, I want you to talk a little bit about coloring that piece. I was the penciler on the alternate cover for that piece. And the setting I chose was sort of a 90s throwback setting, an action scene with dust and debris rising as a Men in Black style government helicopter hovers above our heroes, and they are armed to the teeth and ready for anything, protecting young Vinny, our two adults. And give us a little bit about what you thought of the cover, first of all, when you first saw it, whether I'd gone over the top or not, and then your approach to coloring it, as it is more of a throwback cover.
Well, I hate to disappoint you here, but Mickey Clausen
Mickey color. Okay.
colored your cover.
Okay.
I colored these two covers.
Gotcha.
So
Okay. Okay.
I inked and colored these two.
Fantastic.
I love your setup on this because it was dynamic. It is action packed. You are correct. It gives a sense of drama, and you get the feeling that these the two adults that are standing on either side of our little heroine here will go to any lengths to protect her. So I really, really loved this cover that you did. It was just spot on, and that's why I chose to use this cover for the trading card.
Oh yeah, well I appreciate that. What I wanted to do was hint at things to come, because if I recall correctly, Olivia, the woman on the cover, she's not really involved until issue 2, correct?
Right.
Okay, so what I assumed was that she was just as capable and fierce as Zachary Gray, and so I wanted to put these two in that classic protect the kid situation.
Yep.
And arm them as we are used to seeing characters armed in action adventures back in the 90s, just loaded, ready for bear, ready for anything.
And you will find out in issue number 3 just how fierce she actually is.
Yeah, I saw a little example of that in 2. So let's get into the storyline itself. As we bring up page 1 of issue 2. Now these interiors you did color, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I want you to talk as we start to look at the pages, starting with page 1. I want to get us into your approach to coloring it with regard to what colors were chosen and why, but also this will be an interesting place to begin our discussion of how you, as the story creator, interact with R.A. Jones, who writes the script, and how you guys decided, to open this just with this full-on action scene. Just, there's guns blazing, and the two main characters thus far are in dire peril. But how did you block the scene, with the artist? Did you write it? Did you suggest it? How did that all come about?
We have a very symbiotic relationship, R.A. and I. That the story ideas are mine, and when I set out to do issue number 2, the same as I did for issue number 1, I do an outline, and I outline each page, saying what I want to see on this page. And I have suggestions in there for dialogue, but I don't have all the dialogue in. I have emotions I put into the outline, and I direct RA as to where the issue is going, and then I send the outline to him, and he may make a few suggestions and saying, instead of this scene here, you might want to flip it over to this page and reverse the action here, and then it comes back to me, and I will make any notations on that, and then the outline goes back to him again, and he will do the first draft of the script, and then it comes back to me, and I'll say, okay, you need to tone this down here, or she's talking like a 7-year-old, she's 11. Okay, I want Zach to start realizing that this is actually his sister, not his half sister, but this is the only family he's got left. So he needs to start toning down the resentment towards her and start realizing that he loves her. And so because the script reflects him being a little too harsh on her and so then it goes back to RA, and he'll do the fixes that I suggest. This scene needs to be punched up a little bit, or this scene needs to be dialed back a little bit. Oh, not quite as much blood here.
Mhm,
You know, we
mhm.
want to keep this PG. And he will rewrite it, and then it'll come back to me for a final run through. And then the script will go to Alex, my penciler.
Ah,
And we'll basically, it's kind of more of the same, where every page that Alex does, he'll message me the page, the finished pages, and ask me if he needs to make any changes. And I don't have to make many changes. He's just that good. But there are sometimes I'm like, you're going to have to tone the blood spatter down on this one. We're trying to keep it PG. The boys, they seem to really like their blood.
yeah. Well, you know, we like a lot of action, and that sadly sometimes results in some bloodshed. Now, as we open the story, Zach and Vinny are being just shot at. I mean, these people are trying to kill. We assume as we move into the story that they're targeting Zach. Is that correct? Because
their goal or their orders are to snatch Vinny and kill anyone that gets in their way.
okay.
And obviously, Zach, I think they weren't expecting the kind of resistance that they found with him.
Right.
They had no trouble at all bumping off the parents, but they've come up against a wall when it comes to Zach, and they're finding out the hard way that they were unprepared for what they got themselves into.
Now, in terms of these characters, let's move on as we keep going through the story. I see we're looking at page 2. Are we at this point to know whether these guys are hired private assassins or government? Because at this point in the story, we're kind of curious. Like, okay, they are loaded for bear. They've got the latest tech and the latest armor and the latest weaponry. So could they be government? Could they be private? Obviously, we don't know. But as the story unfolds, did you want the implication at this point that they go one way or the other, or did you want to keep it ambiguous?
Right at the beginning, before we get too much farther into the story, it is ambiguous. We don't know who is behind this, and the uniforms are vague enough that they could have been black ops with the patches ripped off,
Right.
or paramilitary mercenaries.
Right.
You can't tell from the very beginning, and that's deliberate, because I want people to raise the questions in their head as to who is behind it. And of course, a little few pages on, we do find out.
Right.
But yeah, it's ambiguous, because regardless, one way or the other, if it's the government or if it's a private enterprise, they've got money, and you can tell that because the Black Ops guys are dressed to the nines in all the latest stuff.
Yes. And what's exciting as we move forward through the story is they are so loyal and fanatic and zealous to their employer that when Zach goes to question one of the wounded, it's very clear that one of the characters crunches down on a suicide pill, and so again the whole feel of this issue after that fantastic opener. The whole feel of this one is, man, the stakes are raised. The threat level is DEFCON 4. They are going to kill everybody that gets in the way. In terms of capturing Divinity and using her for their nefarious purposes.
Yes, but is it fervent devotion, or is it fear that makes these guys so fanatical?
Yeah, that's great. That's, again, I like that ambiguity there. It keeps us guessing. And I like the fact as we get into page 4 we see what a good defender and soldier that Zach is. As we move on to page 5, we see that Vinny, she reacts the way an 11-year-old would in that situation. She's terrified. She's hiding. Talk a little bit about, as you're concepting this and writing this character, are your plans to grow her to where she learns, hey, even though I'm an 11-year-old kid, I'm kind of a powerhouse. I'm kind of a badass here. Are we going to get there, or is that going to take a while to develop? Talk about that a little bit.
She's been thrown into an adult world rather abruptly.
Okay.
She was a very sheltered, loved 11-year-old with a loving father and mother. And all of a sudden, her entire world has been ripped apart. The rug's been pulled out from underneath her. And she's so confused and hysterical at the beginning. And as with most kids, you tell them to do something, and the first thing they want to say is, why?
Yeah.
Why? Why do I have to do so? Well, she needs to learn that she doesn't have time to say why, because that's going to get her killed.
Yeah.
She's going to have to learn to obey Zach without question.
Mm-hmm.
And as we go along, we see that she's starting to get out of the fear stage and going into the angry phase.
Okay.
Like, this is not what my life is supposed to be. I'm supposed to be having fun, and I'm a little girl, and everything's ruined, and I hate everybody.
Yeah, thrusting adult responsibilities onto a preteen, that usually causes trouble. Okay, so we also have this. This was one of the most interesting parts of the issue to me. As we move later into the issue, which we're not going to give away everything there, but I want to tease the viewers here with this because I want them to buy the book. You've got to pick up Divinity #2. We see a hint that the power to heal might also come with a power to harm. Talk a little bit about what your intentions are with the scene that I'm teasing later in the book.
Well, as with almost anything medical, it goes both ways. You can heal, but you can also harm. When I first brought this to RA, the idea that I wanted a little bit of a reversal of powers, turn the faucet the other direction. The first thing that he came up with was his bursting in the flames or smoking. I'm like, time out. See, you've got to, and I'm really, really fanatic about this. Is it realistic? I like realism. I don't like to get too far out into so you have to look at the human body. The human body can't just burst into flames. It has to be realistic. So what can the human body do with the laying on of hands? What can you imagine going wrong with the human body that can be manipulated? So you can do all sorts of things. You can stop the heart. You can have a brain aneurysm. You can cause boils to burst out all over the body. I mean, all sorts of things like that. But it can't be stuff like blowing a body apart. It has to be something that's realistic that you would normally find in real life that would happen to a human body. So I had to kind of put the brakes on that. And then he came back with another solution, and I really liked it. So we see just a hint. I mean, she's only ever healed. So this is her first real attempt at defense instead of offense. And she does it more out of fear than anything else. But this is going to be a learning experience, and she's going to realize that her strong emotions have triggered a flight or fight response. And she's going to be surprised that it doesn't go just one way. And we will explore those options further down the road.
That's intriguing to me because, again, when you're given this character. This character has this tremendous amount of power, and you are approaching this from a very, like you say, realistic point of view, a grounded point of view, even though there are elements of supernatural power involved in the story. When she uses the power for healing, you know, as we all would feel, one would imagine that you feel a sense of gratification, maybe even, you know, joy, relief, etc., positive emotions.
Mhm.
But if you do cause harm to another human being, again, in self-defense, maybe there's not so much regret. But if things escalate to the point where maybe she harms someone more so than she intended, because preteens are maybe not so in control of their emotions, then she may have to deal with the repercussions of regret. Are you going to sort of walk
Or
that
guilt.
line? Guilt, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as Peter Parker says, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And this is something that she's going to have to learn as she matures, because, as you said, she's a preteen, and they're prone to hysterics and over emotional reasoning and meltdowns and loss of control. So she's going to have to have some experience first before she learns how to be able to recognize whether she's gone too far or not, you know. And kids don't have that emotional maturity at the age of 11 to realize all the aspects and the gray areas of right and wrong, you know.
Yeah.
And it'll be a learning experience. Once you've gone through that experience once, you grow up really fast.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to watch how that unfolds with Divinity, because again, younger readers who identify with her then can sympathize as she feels, you know, all this full range of emotions, just from fear, which is primarily the one, but also maybe a little bit of guilt. And then again, as the story unfolds, I can't wait to see what she becomes, you know, because again, you're creating these three-dimensional characters. They really live. And before we go to one of the fun parts of this, which I call dream casting, I want to touch very briefly on the character of Olivia, who is on the cover and is introduced in this issue. Tell us a little bit about Olivia's connection to Zach.
Olivia served in the Marines under Zach in Afghanistan.
Okay.
So she's very experienced. She was out on the front lines. And I know that people say there are no female Marines out on the front lines. Number one, I'm not absolutely positive that's not the case. And number two, it's my world. I can make her out on the front lines if I want to.
Yes.
So she's a tough cookie. She's very feminine, but she's also very tough. And she doesn't take any guff. I was going to say something else, but
yeah.
From anybody. She doesn't suffer fools lightly. And she's very well trained and knowledgeable in self-defense, weaponry, and tactics. So when she's been out of the military here for a bit, and she's stuck in a dead-end job doing road work, construction work, and she's like, oh, is this what my life, after all of that excitement, this is what my life is? Turning a sign, stop, go, at a construction site. And so when Zach calls her for help, it's not exactly that much of a hardship to drop that stop and go sign and go helping.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll explore more of their adventures in the next issue, and exactly how far she is willing to go to help him and Vinny as well. And she's going to, as we go along, she's going to become a surrogate mother, but there's no romantic relationship between her and Zach. But
Okay.
she was or like a big sister or a surrogate mother. And I'm going to reveal a little bit of a tidbit from issue number 3 here, is that her and Zach get into a little bit of a minor argument about her willingness to jump into their problems and throw her lot in with them. And he's concerned that this is going to put her in danger, and she's saying she's ready for it. And then she pulls out the big guns and says, "What are you going to do the first time Vinny gets a period?" And Zach's like, "Okay, you can come."
There you go. Well, I love that relationship, not because one would assume by default the standard stereotypical, and they fall in love, and or they fall into a sort of X-Files dynamic of will they or won't they, and maybe you do have that in mind. I don't know.
If it does, it's going to be way down the road. I don't. That's not what I didn't want this to be a rom-com or have a lot of unresolved sexual tension, although there might be a little bit of that. But I think I'd like to see them both have fun on the side without the other ones like tease each other. And I haven't decided yet, but I have no issue with making Olivia play for both teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a tough cookie. I think she can do whatever she wants. You know?
Absolutely. I like to explore something here that's just kind of fun and out there. And if it ever happens, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I like to call it dream casting. And ever since I've geeked out with my friends about creator-owned properties, we always, almost always anyway, begin to discuss, well, who in the current climate would you cast as this character? Would if the story was made into a film or television series? And I don't know if people have seen this yet, but there was a movie that came out that wasn't particularly well received. And Carlos, when you get a moment, if you could bring up a picture of this young lady, I think she would be perfect for the role of Vinny in Divinity. This young lady was in the movie Dr. Sleep with Ewan McGregor, who we will discuss later. And her name is Kylie Curran, or Kylie Curran.
Oh, wow.
And she may be a little older than Vinny in the book, but she is tremendously charismatic, wonderful actress. And she plays a character who is gifted with supernatural powers, who is being hunted by supernatural beings. And I couldn't help but notice the similarity in the story concept and the structure. And all of a sudden, I put 2 and 2 together in my head. I'm like, oh, wow, would she make a great Vinny? I don't know if you've seen the film Dr. Sleep, Barb. But
no, I haven't. But she looks perfect.
Isn't she great? She does a fantastic job playing a young lady that's completely out of her element at the beginning, and then when she realizes the tremendous psychic powers that she has, things go crazy. And as you can imagine, she has to defend herself and others with the power. And she was able to portray that full range of, innocent being hunted to fierce defender of herself and the people she cares about. And I thought, wow, what a great casting for Vinny. So if anyone has any connections out there and you're watching this, or hey, Kylie Curran herself, you are a fantastic actress. We'd love to have you play Divinity in the upcoming adaptation. And before we close out on Divinity number 2, because we do have to move on to Steam Pats number 1, where can folks get their copy of Divinity number 2?
They can buy it with any of our Kickstarters, and we actually have a Kickstarter going on right now. It's Bay and what's the other one? Oh my god, I forgot the name of the other one. It's on Kickstarter right now. It's under Silverline, and you
Okay.
can order any of our issues of any of our books with any of our Kickstarters, or you can go to silverlinecomics.com and order it through Indie Planet.
So remember that, everyone. Silverlinecomics.com. Search Silverline in the Kickstarter and also at Indie Planet. Make mine Silverline is our motto here, and we encourage you, go out and get Divinity #2. It delivers
The mashup. That's right.
Yes.
I remember the other one now. It's the Ms. Fury and it's Champion and Miss Fury. Thank you.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
My mind just went blank. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. We're going to be talking about those titles as well pretty soon. But once again, everyone, go get your copy of Divinity #2. It is fantastic. Now let's move along. I'd like to start our discussion of Steam Patriots. We'll start by just taking a look at the cover. I had the great opportunity to illustrate the alternate cover for this book as well, which can be described as an alternative history action adventure that takes place during the American Revolution. And our colleague, Scott Wakefield, who is sometimes affectionately called Swake, which he hates, he's not here with us as he is on a what would you call it? A jaunt cross country, but he'll be back, and we can talk about him all we want. So listen to this and just get really, really annoyed, and then get back at us next week.
I'm not sure if it's completely across country, but it certainly seems like it's up and down the eastern seaboard.
Absolutely.
And the whole photos he's posting, I'm completely envious.
Yes, as am I. As we can see from the cover here of Steam Patriots, this is Felix Ward. He's a young man who is gifted with a photographic memory and also with being in the right place, some might say the wrong place, at the wrong time. The setup is this. It's during the American Revolution, and in this particular world, steam power is prevalent in this version of the alternative history. And this young man and his father get the word. As we look on page 1, we immediately know as we enter the story that we're in an alternate world because we see this steam-powered coach coming up, and it's just a fantastic
with iron
opening.
horses.
Yes.
Did you notice that the rivets on the horses?
Yes, iron horses, and you can just hear the steam, and even the way the sound effects are listed with the hissing and the cranking of the gears and so on. So we're immediately immersed into the proper mindset, the proper atmosphere for
not
the
only
story.
that, but the facial expressions on the guys are just hysterical.
Yes.
He's in a panic.
Yeah, he's in a panic. The British are coming. The British are coming. For those who remember their American history, and in this particular case, this young man's father has some plans for a special weapon that may just turn the tide for either the Brits or the Americans in the American Revolution. And as we open the story, we're immediately, as I say, immersed as the gentleman is riding in with the iron horses, and it's steaming, and they come in, and Felix and his father, of course, the announcement is made. The British, they're on their way, etc., etc. The tone is very much action adventure, but in a it's not dark and serious. This is a rollicking adventure, and we accept things like the fact that Felix is defiant no matter what, and he's going to stand up to these Brits as they come to his home and threaten his father, and basically the father gives in and says, "Okay, well, don't hurt us, don't hurt my son. I'll give you the plans." Well, this, of course, enrages Felix. Dad, how could you? And so Felix races and gets the plans and runs off and is being hunted by British soldiers. And I don't want to give too much away. I just want to set it up. But where we get to is simply the fact that this young man embodies the early American settler defiance against the greatest empire of the time, which was the British Empire.
He's full of idyllic fervor.
Yes, yes. And he is not about to surrender these plans, even to save his own skin.
Or his father's.
Or his father's. And he realizes as we get a little further into the story that maybe his father acquired these plans not so honestly. And what's so nice about Scott's script here is he brings us in, and so the window to the story, our surrogate as we experience this adventure, is young Felix Ward, who's, again, probably 15. And he's just racing around and putting the story of, hey, wait a minute, my dad and I went up and met with kind of a cool secret engineering society, and one of the guys my father talked to was Benjamin Franklin, and they talked about some important plans and stuff. Hey, wait a minute, this might be those plans that the British are after. And so he puts it all together very quickly, and the adventure just continues from there. As we look at some of these pages, Carlos, if you can bring some of them up as you will, you get a really nice feel for the art for this, illustrated by David Mims. It's a very expressive, stylistic.
It's incredibly organic.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it looks like he just set a pen to paper, and just
Yeah.
And it was like, and it's in one way, I am incredibly impressed by it, because that kind of easy talent, I yearn to have that, because I am so incredibly anal. I have to know where every line goes, and I actually get locked into that, and it kind of drives me crazy. I actually envy the ability of somebody just to sit down and start, and
Yes.
it's exciting.
Yes, we're looking at a page now, and for those of you watching, you can see there's a whimsy here. There's a great use of line and caricature, and yet there's a feel of engraving and history, and almost like we're looking at a dollar bill, legal tender brought to life, so to speak. Did you get that feel as well a little bit, Barb? We feel like we're looking something 50 years old.
Well, yeah, pen and ink, it looks like done by quill almost. But you are right, it's very stylistic. But the what's really impressive about it is he gets every emotion down in those scribbles. You could tell exactly what's going on in every single panel. It doesn't have to be super, super detailed, because everything is there.
Yes. Yes. The essential elements are there. And as you said, I envy the ability to be more whimsical and less anchored to realistic reference. Because like you, I also like my work to be anchored in realism. I just fell into that school from the very beginning.
And I overthink everything, every line.
I do as well. And my journey as an artist has always been to try to allow myself and indulge myself a little bit as I grow and mature into a little more whimsy. And this is a great place to sort of bring in a process question for those other creators out there who want to draw comic books. No matter what school you're in, whether it's the realism school or the caricatured cartoon school, there's no judgment here as to the value of each school. But I'd like to know from you, Barb, is do you illustrate for your colleagues to impress, or do you illustrate for yourself, or do you illustrate for the fans? And I'll get to why I'm asking that question after you answer.
I illustrate for myself.
Okay.
it's very much the way that I ink very much aligns with my personality. I'm incredibly anal in my real life. If you've ever seen me organize something or pack a car, you'll know why I ink the way that I do. Where every line has got to be exactly in the right place. You've never
Sure.
seen anybody who can pack a car like I can.
I believe it. I believe it. Well,
I think everything out ahead of time.
Knowing your background as professionally beyond comics in accounting, you would have to have the sort of mind where the accounts have to balance.
Mhm.
Everything has to work. Everything has to have a legitimacy, a realism to it. I've always admired that, but again, because I fall into the realism school as well, what I'm doing with my work is allowing myself to indulge a little bit into the fantasy world. And I had a great opportunity just recently. And for those of you who look me up on Facebook, my recent post really demonstrates a completely different style for me. I had the opportunity and was asked to illustrate the cover of a whimsical, I would say, fantasy for children along the lines of Winnie the Pooh called Bea, which will be explored a little bit more detail in future episodes. But it bears mentioning here in terms of the style was completely not mine. It was a playful, cartoony, childlike approach. And it was a nice change of pace. And what I love about David Mims' art is he channels that inner child, that fantasy, and it still is enough anchored in. We have enough visual cues of the American colonial uniforms, the British imperial uniforms, excuse me, and the sailing ships, and the historical figures of Franklin and Washington.
Or
And
recognizable.
it still works. It's
Mhm.
fantastic. We have a visitor. Aaron, welcome, my friend. Hey, man, no
We're,
worries.
we're
We're
talking
glad you're
about.
here.
Yes, thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. So glad you did, everyone. We're going to let Aaron introduce himself and what he does for Silverline. Go ahead, enlighten us, Aaron. Nice.
Godlings.
Very nice. Very well. We're glad to have you.
Hey, can you guys still hear me? Seems like some of you are kind of slowing down.
You're cutting in and out.
Oh,
Are
wait.
you on Chrome?
Like the
Hello?
stream is slow
Yeah, are you using Chrome?
for me, so let me see if I can figure this out.
You might want to get out and come back in, and especially if you want to use Chrome on this for this. I was going to go back quickly, and
Yes.
we're talking about Steam Patriots,
Okay, so catch up.
and what impressed me about this is the way that Scott set this up. Is that right off the bat, you are jumping feet first into the deep end, and you're into the action immediately. The first panel, you're
Yes.
all it doesn't. There's no build up into it. You're just jumping in, and it's exciting.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I love the way that it started out. It was just like you were full throttle. You were running at full speed out right off the bat.
Yes, I like that. I like getting into a story immediately like that. And again, we are running along with Felix, who has, he pulled the plans that the British are after. And not only does he run away with them, but he burns them.
Mhm.
So the idea is, wait a second. These were important plans for something that may or may not be a huge weapon to defend us against the British Empire, and you just burn them. So we don't know till later in the issue that Felix has an almost photographic memory and remembers most of the plans, which we hope he remembers the pertinent parts of the plan. Did you? What did you think, Barb, when you read that part and you said, "Oh wow, he just burned the plans"? I mean, were you like, "Uh-oh, what do we do now?"
I actually, when I saw him running off and them saying that you got to give the plans back, I was saying to myself, well, I just destroy him. And then he did. I was like, yep, he's my boy. But I cannot believe that this is Scott's first book. This is so well written.
Yes.
He's
Scott,
just so impressive.
He's done a good job with this. We again, just to set the stage here, we meet some historical figures that Scott has woven into his historical fantasy here, including Franklin and Washington at critical points in the Revolution. And we still have that whimsy. If you notice on the cover previously, there was a contraption, and when you have steampunk type of stories like this, you're going to have contraptions that run on steam. And the only guidance I was given when coming up with that is he said, Dean, I want you to use Leyden jars, which I had no idea what those were until I looked them up, but they are devices that channel electricity using water. And
I didn't know that either.
yes, and what's funny is we do get to see a contraption presumably designed by Benjamin Franklin at the end of the issue, which is cool. It looks nothing like what I drew. But what's nice about this is you just can go a little bit over the top crazy with the designs. And he just did a terrific job. The content is good. The rollicking adventure is good. For those of you who like historical fiction, it's perfect. But for those of you who've never tried it, I would encourage you to try this story because it's gonna keep getting better and better. Aaron, have you had a chance to check out Steam Patriots 1? What did you think of it?
Not yet. That's on my stack of to-do read list. I'm trying to read some stuff from a gentleman, Wes Lochner, who is a writer for the story I'm doing for you guys. So I'm going through reading his stuff, and then my friend's been loaning me library books, so I had to I read a pretty cool book about this future society. It's called Astor of Pan.
Oh wow!
It's a European book, but it ended up they're in the future, and these two nations have this sort of game they're going to fight to choose who does what, and you realize as you go through it, it's a huge game of dodgeball that they play over these continents. It's crazy. If you get a chance to check out Astor of Pan, it's a really fun book.
That does sound fun.
But that's what I've been reading lately. So,
well,
yeah.
Your book, since you're on with us, share a little bit about your book, and let's talk a little bit about what you do, what inspired you for the book, and what you read to give you new ideas.
You mean my own personal work, my Goblins book that I do?
Yes, talk about that for a moment.
That book is 12 issues long. I'm almost done. So that is about, in a nutshell, about three gods, young gods, goblins. Mm-hmm. Don't want to be gods, so they leave. And then they just basically leave like teenagers running out of a house. I don't want to do this, and they leave. They end up causing a rebellion and end up causing a great amount of destruction. And then it kind of goes on from there. It's kind of inadvertent. My big inspiration for that, I was a minor in philosophy, almost a major in philosophy in school. So I want to talk about my favorite philosophical issue, which is fate versus free will. That's what inspired me to write that story. And also a show called Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is an anime that was very inspiring to me. Those are the two big things. Other than that, I'm trying to think artistically what inspired me to draw them like that. I can't pinpoint that down right now.
Well, your work,
that's some of the stuff. So my book has a definite ending and everything.
Your work, first of all, we're all jealous at how fast you produce your work because I'm incredibly slow. But so just the fact that you can knock this stuff out is amazing. Everybody go check out Aaron's book, Godlings. You can find it at silverlinecomics.com. You can also go to Kickstarter and put in Silverline and find it there. But what's interesting, though, is you talked about, sort of a faith-based or inspired foundation and subject matter. And I'm also inspired by the same thing. In my book, I'll take a few moments here to talk about Silver Blade. The upcoming Silver Blade is basically an order of holy knights set in the time period in which Dracula was written and takes place in Victorian England. So we have a secret order of sacred knights versus a version of the Hellfire Club in Victorian England. And so it's a faith-based situation where I'm going to bring in I'm going to bring in two questions in my storyline that I tease people when I talk about it. The first one is, why does silver defeat evil beings? Now, a lot of storylines have addressed that question. I actually answer it in my own story. Obviously, it's, you have to read the whole thing to get the answer to that. The second question is the deeper philosophical question. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yes, which has been,
And I wanted to address that not in an arrogant, I have the answer way, but more in a, how do these characters address this? How do we address this? People of faith, and people who are agnostic, how do we address this issue of, if you do everything you're supposed to do, you play by the rules, and horrific things still happen to you, then what's the motivation to keep playing by the rules? How do we resolve the struggle of being the Boy Scout when it seems like all the bad guys are winning? That's a big,
basically stay
deal.
the course sort of idea.
Yes, and the idea, it's been addressed in some recently made films. Kingdom of Heaven sort of addressed a little bit.
That was Ridley Scott, if I'm not mistaken.
That's why I chose knighthood as a backdrop for that, because, I always wanted to be a Knight of the Round Table as a kid, and growing up as a Boy Scout. The idea of, having a code of virtue to live by, and it was just instilled in us by that Scoutmaster.
It's self-determination.
Yes, and as I demonstrated to Barb a couple of weeks ago, I still remember the Scout Law, off the top of my head, and it's one of those things. I mean, I'll rattle it off for you if you want it. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And the idea that we had to aspire to that, it wasn't a snobbery thing. It was, you aspire to this because you're going to be the best self you can be. And so it was the challenge to the individual to be the best you could be, while the other people who maybe made different choices, and maybe it looked like they were getting ahead and you weren't, and maybe you were mocked for being a nerd or too much of a good guy, or and that's why I identified a lot with Cap, Captain America in the latest Avengers incarnation, because I understand the difficulty for people, and myself too, the inner struggle of, God, it just feels like, being a Boy Scout's like being a nerd sometimes, being square, so to speak, but sticking to it.
I think you have to, what I have a problem with Cap with is that he really walks a fine line between being full of integrity and being self-righteous.
Sure.
And you have, sometimes he falls too far to the self-righteous side, and he becomes inflexible because of it. So you have to really be careful that you're not becoming full of your own hubris.
Correct.
That's why I was always a big fan of Judge Dredd, because he embodied the inflexible.
The inflexible.
Have you read Judge Dredd stuff?
Is his way? Well, actually, I did the book.
Yeah, So I mean, he's just like, and the funny thing is he runs the law, and it's not about ego, it's self-interest. It's just very black and white. If you break the law, this
his way or the highway.
Yeah. And so I remember one of the stories, there was another mega city, because humanity's quarantined in these certain huge cities after this Great War, and one of the cities attacked his city, And so he nuked and destroyed like billions of people in the city, and they asked why, and it's like they broke the law.
There you go. I mean, right?
That's it. That's it. They broke the law. That's it.
Right?
No, there's no empathy. There's no. They broke the law. So I remember reading that, just going like, "All right, yeah, I get it." I mean, because that's what that character would do.
I worked on a Judge Dredd miniseries, so yeah.
Oh, did you?
I know Judge Dredd.
Yeah. So I used to read all, but yeah, I never really got an ego. He's definitely a different character because I never got it that he was self-righteous as he thought he was right. He just followed he's like the perfect soldier. He just,
there's the rules and then there's not the rules.
Exactly. It's literally, that's what it is. And that's why I just thought he was such he's such a straight man. He just can do all sorts of crazy things, and he's just gonna,
Yeah. It's interesting. Many genre titles have addressed this, from RoboCop.
Yeah.
Similar idea, right? But you have this character, and it's their inflexibility that makes it interesting. Like, how far is this character going to go?
Exactly.
We had a wonderful foray into that type of storytelling with Denny O'Neill's excellent creation of Azrael. Avenging Batman. When Batman's back was broken by Bane, way back when, for all you kids in the 1990s, before there was a Dark Knight Rises, there was Bane and breaking Batman's back, and then we had a zealous knight from an order take over Batman for a while named Azrael, and he was just like Judge Dredd. I mean, it was just he just took him out.
I got to do a pin-up of him and Batman.
Well, he had like the flaming sword. I mean, so he was like the epitome of like righteousness or whatever.
Right.
And
but it was completely like no mercy. They're bad guys. Kill them. Eliminate them. That's it. We're done.
No jail.
No jail. Yeah. And so we saw the far extreme version of Batman had, Bruce become dehumanized to the point of being a machine. And so that was a wonderful philosophical discussion. That underpinning was about the nature of going too far in the service of the law, or his idea of justice, and so on, and what it does to the person.
The fun thing about writing that sort of character is trying to make them anything other than one-dimensional.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And it's very hard. I think that's why, because I'm also a big fan of Conan, which is also very kind of one-dimensional character. Mm-hmm. He's totally this completely free man who, and Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft would have, you can read those letters, conversations about the natural state of man is wild and free, which is Robert E. Howard and Conan. H.P. Lovecraft said no, the natural state of man is civilization, cities, and they would argue that. And so Conan became the embodiment of almost like Robert E. Howard's stance in that argument through his letters. Like, no, he's the absolute free man. Natural state of man is free. But because of that, he became a one-note character and that was most of the time, most Conan stories, a lot of them had to do with him encountering city officials or whatever, and just basically telling them, go away. I mean, whatever. Because
you can't tell me what to do.
You can't tell me what to do. Literally,
right.
The untamed wild man.
You got my thoughts of me.
He represents the pure ego, right?
Yeah, the pure, the sort of the bestial side of humanity, where nothing can control.
Unrestrained by mores, rules, etc.
Exactly.
And we see, to be fair to that side, we also saw the downside when he would get everything he wanted and then be bored stiff because he had nothing else to win and conquer.
Sitting on his throne, looking bored.
All the treasure, all the women, everything that a barbarian
the classic,
would want. And he was bored out of his mind. So again, that was almost a philosophical commentary on, is the end of that road of just feeding the flesh, is it empty? Is that nice?
And I think ultimately, I would say yes, and I think that was not. And I haven't read too many of the King Conan stories, but yeah, I would say that's always kind of been every time I see people talk about a rise to power or rise to authority, they usually lose whatever caused them to rebel to get there in the first place.
Yes,
is hedonism really worth it?
Exactly.
Right, because it's never ending. It's never enough.
Exactly. That's the idea of like greed. If you how do you temper greed with enough? And
right.
So
So that brings us to the end of the first hour, folks. So we appreciate everyone attending and watching. We're going to be having fun here with part 2, so stick with us. But again, you can get Divinity #2 and also Steam Patriots #1 at silverlinecomics.com, silverlinecomics.com, silverlinecomics.com. Okay, what I want to do with the next segment is have a great time talking about rumors I've heard about the next Star Wars television series entitled Kenobi.
Oh, do we want to bring Carlos in for this?
Carlos, yes.
Do you want to join us for the Star Wars talk?
You are invited. Our illustrious producer and technical advisor, Carlos, you are cordially invited to join this discussion, as well as provide us with, at your leisure, the images from Kenobi.
Because he's a Star Wars fan, so we like to bring him in.
Oh, we always
Star Wars
to join in, especially with Star Wars discussions. Now, let me set the table here. Again, I like to call this with a shaker of salt rumors. So take them with a whole shaker, not just with a grain. But my contacts are telling me that is on good authority that in the new Kenobi television series, which takes place, for those of you who don't know already, during the time in which Kenobi is watching after young Luke. So this would be presumably right before Episode 4. And we presume that Obi-Wan Kenobi, while he watches after Luke at the farm, has to protect the farm and Luke from, I guess, would be bounty hunters, anything from that to threats we don't know anything about, the dark side, but also things like sand people.
I was just going to say, how about sand people?
Yeah, I know.
So what I have heard on good authority is that Darth Vader will be making an appearance in the Kenobi series and will face off with Kenobi. Well, of course, that throws all of us fans into, the vapors. Wait a second. This is going to wreak havoc with existing canon, because in Episode 4, we know when they meet up, we know what Ben and Darth say. Darth says, when we last were together, I was the learner, now I am the master. Well, if they're going to meet up, it's going to throw that off the rails. What's going to happen here? So before I reveal how I have heard it's going to happen, what is you guys' response? Barb, what's your first response to potentially seeing Darth Vader in the Kenobi series?
Well, my first response was that in the original movie, nobody knew who Luke was. He was a nobody on a sand planet, chasing womp rats. Mm-hmm. And then it's eventually revealed that he's the next big Jedi Knight, and then eventually it's revealed that he's Darth Vader's son. So if Darth Vader comes to Tatooine early, wouldn't he figure that out? I mean, wouldn't the whole reason for the keeping Luke under wraps be kind of blown to hell?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think when he feel him, don't they feel each other or whatever?
Yes.
You feel a disturbance in the Force.
Yeah, there's that whole disturbance in the Force thing. What are your thoughts on it, Aaron? Tell us what your response is.
This is the first I've heard of it. I was thinking to watch the second. I've heard most of the second season of Mandalorian. Haven't watched it yet. I get on to.
Please do,
I get
because
caught up in other stuff.
Shame on you, but
I know. I've been watching a show called Record of Lodoss War again.
Okay.
So that's an old anime series I saw back when I was a kid.
Oh.
Which you actually might like, since you like fantasy stuff.
Oh,
if you
yeah.
ever check out Record of Lodoss War, it's basically Dungeons and Dragons, the anime style, like in the 80s or whatever. It's a good show.
Very cool.
Very influential for some comics that came out in the 90s. That would be interesting. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing about Kenobi. I personally, when it comes to the Kenobi and stuff, I wish with the TV show, I think the TV shows work better with new characters. That's why I saw the first season of Mandalorian. I was like, well, this works better because it's their own characters. I sometimes get problems going back and messing with stuff that's between shows, because I'm like, yeah, it's cool to see him as Kenobi again, but it's like we see how loose Disney's been with respecting canon anyways, so I wouldn't put much past them to throw Darth Vader in because it brings in viewers, not because they have any sort of point. They're just like, well, Darth Vader's in it. Don't you want to watch it? I mean, look at Mandalorian. They brought Boba Fett, Luke at the end. Like I heard all these, and it's like it's that so-called fan service, and that's always kind of been one of the things that's kind of bummed me out about some of the Disney stuff. It's like, is it necessary? Who cares? It's fan service. Throw it in. I'm like, okay.
I know it feels like Wolverine over at Marvel sometimes, right? Carlos, what about you? Chime in here, and when you first hear this, and if you know how he's going to be brought in, don't reveal it. I'm going to reveal that here in a second. But what's your initial response hearing these rumors about Kenobi?
I mean, part of me wants to squill in delight.
Like a fangirl?
Hey, that's okay.
Pretty much, yeah. I'm trying not to. And then part of me also wants to, scream in rage because, like you said, it's they're messing with canon, and a lot of us were already upset whenever Legends became non-canon, right? Everything that was Legends was non-canon. I mean, some of the books that came out that talked about these spaces in between, the movies and the shows were so fabulous. They were amazing and fantastic. And then Disney bought everything, and none of that mattered anymore. I have those encyclopedias that came out from Star Wars, that are like, I bought them cheap because all of a sudden Disney bought everything, and it was like, none of this in here really matters anymore. Yeah. So that's, that kind of bums me out a little bit because the continuity, it's important to fans like us. Mm-hmm. There are certain things that you can do, and then there are certain things that you kind of have to scratch your head and say, okay, how many times can we start creating multiverses?
Yeah. Well, I heard rumors that, and I don't know how many, I heard a rumor that they want to go back and redo the last 3 movies, and they want to use this loophole that was introduced in the Clone Wars about that sort of extra dimension where you can go to different points in time and use that to rewrite it. And I just honestly think they should just go do. I mean, they're aren't they making that High Council?
Yeah, they're making High Republic.
Why don't they do something with that? Yeah, the High Republic. That's what it is.
Yeah, they're making High Republic. But what you're speaking of is, and I've heard this as well on good authority. Jon Favreau has become more and more powerful as the success of Mandalorian has risen. Lucas and Favreau and Filoni are really running the shows now. And the idea is that Ahsoka, in her series, is going to encounter a sacred place of the Force where there is something called the Veil of the Force, which opens multiverse doorways. And one of the multiverse timelines is the Rey timeline, but there is another timeline for the sequels that supposedly now reveals the more George Lucas preferred storyline that had nothing to do with, echoing, I should say, or being a tribute to 4, 5, and 6. It was more, let's keep going in a linear direction of what's Luke going to do? He's the only Jedi that he knows of. He's got to find the other, he's got to find talented, gifted Force users. He's got to train them. He's got to restart the Jedi Temple. He's got to figure all this out. And rather than do, a remake with a female lead, which is what a lot of people accuse The Force Awakens of being, he wanted to move it forward. So that being said, that is still being talked about. I would imagine that Lucas can do whatever he wants at this point. It's like, if he said, I kind of want to do another sequel trilogy, I'd be like, great, George, you can produce, hopefully Favreau will write it with Filoni, and we'll just keep going straight. Keep going forward.
Now, is Lucas in charge again?
Lucas is the power behind the throne. Filoni and Favreau are rising in
I thought
power.
Disney owned Star Wars. I thought
they do.
But Lucas still have some control over it?
Lucas has been brought in, especially now that Kathleen Kennedy's material is not being as well received as in, episode 8 and 9. A lot of hardcore fans did not receive those as well. And Kennedy's being blamed for various things. Her material it's just the High Republic material is just not as being as well received as Favreau's material. So what they're saying is maybe let Favreau and Filoni sort of handle the classic characters and move that story forward, and maybe Kennedy can do something else. Because I mean, there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
at Lucasfilm.
It's a whole universe. Yeah, I mean, Filoni, everything he touched. I mean, the Clone Wars series was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, after seeing the Clone Wars TV series, it made the prequels like totally fine.
Yeah.
Like I saw the prequels, it seemed rushed, and I never could get a straight answer if the Clone Wars cartoon was something that was possibly hinted or planned when they started making the prequels, that they knew they were going to make these TV series to fill in the war. Because even watching the movies, I'm like, you know, the second movie is the beginning of the war, the third movie is the end of the war. Because obviously in what happened during the war, and that TV series, that's why when I watched the end of the third one, and Kenobi's like, you know, you were like a brother to me. After watching the TV series, I was like, well, now I get that. And when I first saw the movie, I'm like, I don't really get that. Yeah. Now it makes much more sense. I think the Clone Wars cartoon series is almost mandatory viewing when watching the movies. I mean, because it just fills in it just builds those characters so much. And so if Filoni is involved in it, he's the only one that I feel that has really nailed Star Wars as the field. That all the stuff he's done, like, okay, this guy gets it. This guy gets what it's about. I've always felt that way.
I agree.
And I will see it. The other movies just didn't feel like it. I think the one thing is me and I have a friend, Tom, who've talked about this a long time. The new movies made the Jedis like superheroes.
Yes.
And they were never supposed to be superheroes. The abilities are supposed to augment their natural fighting ability. In other words, they're supposed to train, and the Force is supposed to, you know, when they jump, it like propel them or whatever. But, you know, when they started like doing, you know, Force healing and then like all this other stuff, you're like, well, these guys are way too powerful. And it was never supposed to be that. It was just supposed to be the Force is supposed to already augment the already extreme training they got as Jedi.
They're supposed to
That's
be
what I
like
was thinking.
space gunfighters.
Space gunfighters. They reminded me a lot of more like Buddhist monks, like Kung Fu and stuff. He got that a lot. And that sort of, and I took the Force when he introduced it as his sort of space version of Chi.
Yeah, it was samurai.
That's
samurai.
what like the sort of like the Chi is what you use to focus. That's what I took a lot of that, because if you look at the Force is very heavily influenced by Taoism, which I've been studying Taoism for 20 years. That's very influenced. It's like, oh, is it supposed to be like, you know, the Chi and all of that? But he actually said it's like you know, it's all very heavily influenced by that. Yeah, and the gunslingers as well, especially the Old West setting.
Yes.
Which Magnificent Seven and all that, huge inspirations, all that.
Sure.
I can't tell how many stories. I think they did a Magnificent Seven or the Seven Samurai in the Clone Wars. They did one in the Mandalorian. And I can't remember how many times they've done that story in Star Wars, which is I'm totally fine, but they've done it a lot.
Yeah, the tributes and homages to the Asian cinema, the Japanese cinema that inspired this. Specifically, the Zen philosophy is there. Yoda speaks like a Zen master.
He does. Exactly. All that stuff is very influenced.
The idea, the blend, there is a little bit of a Templar meets samurai blend.
Yes. He has the Knights of the Round Table influence in there very much.
There's a nice blend of that. We have a guest here that just appeared that I'd like to call out. Mr. Brent Larson, ladies and gentlemen, has joined us late in the show, but we're glad he's here nonetheless. Brent, could you introduce yourself to the fans and briefly tell us about who you are?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Brent Larson. I'm the creator-writer of the Silverline book, Kalis, and the creator-writer of the upcoming Silverline book, Cape Town. And I can't talk to you guys. I just like Star Trek. So
Carl isn't ever going to talk to you then.
No, I was like, oh, they're talking about Star Wars. That's great. Nobody ever talks about Star Wars.
Not in this channel.
No, never. No, we are responding to the rumors. Again, I through the contacts that I have, I found out a little tidbit of gossip about what may be appearing with a grain of salt in the upcoming Kenobi TV series. And it was revealed recently that Darth Vader will make an appearance. And we're all wringing our hands at the obvious difficulty with blending that with existing canon. Wait a minute, that can't work. I mean, for all these various reasons, Force sensitivity, Vader would know his son was nearby. that would kill a lot of the drama of Kenobi and Vader meeting again after so long in Episode 4 in their duel. So at this point, I'll bring in the explanation that I've gotten from this source, and that is that Kenobi is suffering in nightmares what he has done to his brother in the Order, and that Anakin Vader appears in these nightmares, this internal struggle in terms of how he resolves what he's done, how he tries to live with it, and these hauntings happen either in a force vision, a nightmare, or something very similar to Luke in the cave/tree where he encounters Vader and cuts Vader's head off and the helmet opens to reveal Luke's own face. So, how do you guys feel about Vader appearing in the Kenobi series in those circumstances? Let's start with Barb. How do you feel about that?
That actually works.
Yeah.
As far as and on a side note, has anybody noticed that Carlos kind of looks like Mando?
Oh, I was going to say he looks like Kenobi, but that's...
Not a thing.
Not a thing.
No, it works. It works in that respect. If it's a vision or hallucination or a nightmare, then it works.
I agree. Aaron, what are your thoughts on nightmare, hallucination, force vision, or an encounter in a force-sensitive area?
I could see that working. I think they would have to advertise it that way. I can see them advertising Vader's in it, and then people watching that and be like, it's a dream, whatever. So they might, look at Brent and he's like, yeah,
they did it as a
that might be a little, so they may need to advertise as that, the old, like, when you do, and at the end it wakes up and it's all a dream. It's like, whatever.
Yeah.
I've done that before.
Dallas. Bobby
Yeah.
and Dallas in the shower.
What about you,
Yes.
Carlos? What's your thought on the dream, force vision, nightmare encounter?
I think it works. I think putting that character into turmoil definitely, gives us a purpose to go back and revisit that story again. I still don't know exactly what that timeline is going to look like, but I think it definitely gives us some resolution there.
I think so too. Brent, what are your thoughts on bringing Vader into the Kenobi story as a haunting or a regretting experience for Kenobi?
Well, kind of going back to what Aaron was saying, it doesn't have any dramatic heft. It feels like fan service, kind of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if these guys got together again? Well, why? Because it would be cool. Like, come on. But I will say this. Forget the dream part. What if they actually, I'm just going to solve everyone's problems because I know that's what
Mr.
you're
Screenwriter here.
Yeah,
Go
that's
for
what you're
it.
secretly asking me to do. So, okay.
Yes.
You win. Okay.
Okay.
If they had some kind of a force vision where the two of them actually did connect in a way that, so Vader knows that Kenobi is alive.
Yes.
And of course, Kenobi is trying to stay away from Vader's radar because he knows that he could let slip that Vader has some kiddies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so suddenly you have a potential story problem, which is, what if somehow the two of them have a dream? Why not? But it's a forced dream where the two of them somehow face off against each other, and Vader says, wait a minute, you're hiding something from me. What is it? And Kenobi's like, turn it off, turn it off.
There is a precedent for that. I don't know if you watch it, but Kylo Ren and Rey actually did that in the last movie.
Yeah, okay. And so let's just rip off that. Okay, actually, it's a terrible idea. I take it back. I'm sorry. I just recycled Star Wars. That's never been done before. Holy cow.
Actually,
well, anyway, just something so that at the end, It wasn't just wow, what a horrible dream. I can't believe I dreamed about Darth Vader. Why did I do that? Well, obviously because Christian, what's his face, has needed the work, so they hired him again.
Yeah.
They would have
Hayden
to really,
Christensen.
Hayden Christensen. So,
Yeah.
so what if they were able to tell a really good story that had some kind of real stakes? Then I would say yes, do it. Otherwise, don't go the dream route. That's
I
it.
would actually. I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, that's it.
Oh yeah, I would actually rather see Qui-Gon Jinn in there than Vader. Because
Interesting.
I would like to know more about, because at the end of the Clone Wars or end of the movie, it was the Clone Wars that was, I think Yoda told Obi-Wan that I will train you to see into the future, or to see, like, Qui-Gon was going to train him as a spirit. I remember that being said, so I think it was a cartoon. It was one of the series, like when he went to the planet, it's like he heard like Qui-Gon, he's like, I would train you to see the future or something of that nature or whatever. So I would be curious. I'd like to see that go forward more than the Vader stuff, per se. So that's the stuff I would rather see, because I like that their relationship in the Phantom Menace. I wanted to see a little more of it.
I agree. That's a good point. Both you guys, excellent points. There's a possible way to blend both those concepts if Kenobi was sensing in a dream sequence or in a particularly dark magnetic area of the Force that Vader, much like Sauron in Lord of the Rings, was searching, and he felt that Vader was getting too close, and then maybe there's a way for Qui-Gon to help Obi-Wan fight that and resist that, and him saying, I can't, I can't let him find his son, because it'll be over with, and then have Qui-Gon say, I can show you how to resist that. And so you could, you could continue both of those storylines a bit.
You could, and I think that would work better. I know people, if they did Kenobi, I know they would want to see the Darth Vader Kenobi relationship, but it would also explain a little bit if he could see the future, because I know that was one of the things the Jedi is highly trained Jedi Masters could do. Yoda was shown doing that. That it would explain why he gave up in the fight in Episode 4 and let Vader cut him down, because he knew that was coming and knew what that. So, but it would explain that, because it was never really explained why he kind of gave up the fight. I mean, obviously he did it so Luke could escape, but he just, readily just put his lightsaber up and just let Vader either cut him down or he went to the Force or something. So that would, maybe they could explain a little bit of motivation of, he saw that coming. This was all preordained. So he knew all this. Or something of that nature. Because that was the one thing I never did get in the original. He put up his sword and he let him cut him down. I'm like, why?
Well,
it was never really explained.
Yeah, I have a good suggestion possibly on that. And that is, if he had a brief vision of the future, then he knew that he had to help Luke relax during that run down the trench, right? And help guide him on when to let that torpedo go to take out the Death Star and so on. So it's like, okay, I can better serve the purposes of the good side by being a spirit rather than my physicality. Obviously, my physicality is decayed to the point where I can't really do what I used to do. And even though I maybe could win this fight, I mean, probably not. So maybe it's better for me to help Luke.
Well, they always dictated that, even Yoda was in Return of the Jedi said, you're not this crude matter. You're luminous being. So I just assume him giving up, like, apparently his flesh, I guess, or his body is just a way of evolving to the next step, which I would assume most Jedis, as they train and get more awareness of the Force, realize the ultimate state of being is energy or the Force, and that when you're ready to give up the physical for the spiritual or the Force, because it seems like they're much more powerful there, and that there is life beyond that. I mean, at the end of Return of the Jedi, they show all the Force goes. So it always seemed like maybe that's a point where they have to get to a point and they just give that up. I mean, even Yoda when he died, it almost like he knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And he just let go. It was more of like he just let go of the will to live and just faded into. But both the Jedis faded, which I thought was interesting. In both movies, both Obi-Wan and Yoda, when they died, there was no body left behind. They faded into nothing. Their material being was dissolved into the Force. Which I thought was, again, the more you train, the more you're able to do that. Or that will happen when you die.
One would assume, based on what we've seen so far, that a level of Jedi mastery must be reached to
do that. Because
to
Vader's
will
body
yourself.
did not.
Right.
Vader's body did not dissolve until he was burned. So there's a little difference I thought was an interesting take.
Brett
Yeah,
looks
and it's all-
just
it all
bored to
could be
tears.
explained.
No. I'm now didn't at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Yoda tell Kenobi that Qui-Gon was going to teach him how to do that?
Maybe that's what it was. There was one of those where like he did teach him. Yeah, because I think he was going to the planet to watch Luke, and he's like, Qui-Gon will teach you this or whatever. I remember that somewhere.
Yeah, it was the last thing Kenobi did before he dropped Luke off with his uncle. So
Is that right, Carlos? He's our resident expert.
Resident Carlos.
That's actually I'm not 100% on that one.
There was something I remember hearing.
I do remember that we are told through the screenplays that Qui-Gon will advise Kenobi on how best to watch over and protect Luke, and prevent Vader from finding him. But also, we see there's a lecture from Yoda to Anakin about grief in I believe Revenge of the Sith, where he's told, that to let go of attachments because it is part of the dark side. He walks it through, staying attached to something is the shadow of greed.
Right.
And so, again, that's very Zen based, the idea of no attachment and the idea of not to grieve when a loved one is lost, because that was what Anakin feared the most was, the loss of the woman he loved. So, and then his mother also, the death of his mother. And he just could not resolve that he couldn't save people that he loved. And Yoda was kind of like saying, look, you're going to face this your whole life. You have to learn to be detached and realize you have to rejoice because they go into, Force heaven in this particular landscape and world. And so, again, that sort of hints that if one is at peace with the Force in a light way, one has a little bit more control over the transition than if you're a dark Force user and you get chopped up, you kind of hurt, and
Yeah, because they always said when the Emperor was thrown down, his body could have been one that he dissolved, but instead of dissolving quietly, he dissolved violently as the light and stuff came back up.
Yeah.
But they never did explain that. I mean, even in the movies they cloned the Emperor, but that had been done in the comics too. I mean, the cloning had been done before. So I'm not going to pick on the movies for that. But it was interesting that if the Emperor is a Force ghost, that can he re-enter another body? And could light Jedis do that too if they were to clone the body of, say, Luke or whatever? If he could actually enter the body and but maybe that's against their code. Maybe the idea of or maybe to them that would be the idea of going backwards instead of forward. Yeah, that's what I took it as.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there, and that maybe that scientific meddling into the mystery of the Force would be considered dark side use rather.
That's what I'm thinking, and so and that would also explain the Sith or the dark side's attachment to materialistic power, materialism, rule, that they want to stay. They want to stay in that physical world as much as possible. Defeat death, and I think that's the main difference. There is the Sith will try to defeat death as the Emperor did, and the Jedis accept death as an inevitability and an evolution of their being. So I can see that there.
Good call. And that brings us to the evolution of the end of this particular episode of Silverline Wednesday Wham. We want to thank, once again, our sponsor, Daytona Beach Comic Convention. We want to thank our technical expert, Carlos, for producing us tonight, and all of our guests. And again, we encourage you to go to silverlinecomics.com, 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 and check out the latest issues of all our books. We are focusing today on Divinity issue number 2 and Steam Patriots number 1. Thanks again for joining us.
Hi, my name is Sergio Cariello, and make mine Silverline.